Hello, good morning everybody. Please take your seats. Good morning, welcome to this GNF on the trilateral initiative we have been undertaken on space traffic management between the IAA, the IAF and the IISL. This will be a briefing for you on where we stand and what next steps we are planning to do. So, following a short overview, we will have representatives of the three organizations telling you what has been done so far, where we stand, what the issues are which are upcoming and which have been discussed already, and the way we want to tackle them in a joint effort. I would only like to remind that during the opening ceremony of the Congress in 2018 in Bremen, we have been signing, the three presidents, the joint memorandum on space traffic management between IAA, IAF and IISL, which comprises and contains a way forward of joining forces, which means ideas, perceptions and analysis of the three organizations, and turn it into something which is useful for the decision makers and useful also for all those who are involved in these activities around space traffic management, so that they can benefit from the experience, the wealth of knowledge of the three organizations separately, but more importantly even all together in an interdisciplinary approach. Having said that, I would like to pass on immediately to the first speaker. It's Corinne Jørgensen, who will report about the status of space traffic management research and activities in the Academy. And we will then immediately turn to the other speakers and at the end have a question and answer where the audience can ask questions, ask about the perspectives of what is going on, and possibly also contribute with their own ideas in this respect. We will not have the electronic system, unfortunately, but we will have microphones where you can ask your questions directly to the audience. So let's start with Corinne. Green.
Good morning. I would like to present the recent studies of the International Academy of Astronautics on space traffic management towards a roadmap for implementation. The study team, led by 4 co-editors, was composed by 10 contributors and about 20 advisors or peer reviewers. This is the second study of the Academy. The first one, released in 2006, kick-started a process of discussion on space traffic management as a means to effectively deal with the increasing challenge space actors face. This new study uses the definition of space traffic management developed in 2006 study, which has proven useful and has been adopted in other publications. Outside the academic world, the term STM was mentioned in various NASA authorization acts, using the STM definition of the 2006 study, which is as follows. Space traffic management means the set of regulations that provisions for promoting safe access into outer space, operations in outer space, and return from outer space to Earth, free from physical or radio frequency interference. The purpose of the study is to revisit and adjust the concept of STM to current advancement in space activities, in addition to presenting a more coherent and robust concept of STM. The study discusses the potential of space traffic management to influence or shape the evolution of the legal and regulatory framework for space activities. The study looks at traffic management in other regimes, presents a detailed, comprehensive space traffic management regime with 2 possible options, and attempts to show how a comprehensive approach to STM may become possible, proposing a concrete roadmap for implementation with a timeline. The study outlines the preconditions and elements of a future comprehensive STM system, including the necessary space situational awareness and the 3 phases that were already identified in the 2006 study as the main constituents: launch phase, in-orbit operation phase, and re-entry phase, as well as space resources. Then the study sets out how an evolution from a technical system or the coexistence of several technical systems to a comprehensive legal regime for STM may look like. In doing so, it sets out 2 possible ways of implementing an STM regime, the first possible path being an incremental bottom-up approach, and the second, a comprehensive top-down approach, which would depend on the political will. An international regulatory STM framework can only be built under the condition of a political and diplomatic context allowing it, and the very idea is widely accepted. In addition to the necessary diplomatic and political work, it must not be forgotten that an international STM regime or system ultimately depends on technical capabilities in order to function. A comprehensive STM regime would have to be elaborated in an inclusive and interdisciplinary manner with the participation of all interested states and could reasonably be achieved in a time frame of 15 years. Developing an understanding for or an acceptance of a top-down STM regime would have to be comprised of 5 lines of action: further interdisciplinary research, opinion building at all necessary levels, advancing technical prerequisites and international cooperation, preparation in UN COPUOS, ITU, ICAO, and other relevant intergovernmental fora, and raising public awareness. So this is the first study to look at a detailed, comprehensive space traffic management regime presenting 2 possible options. In this regard, this study offers an innovative approach. First, a detailed bottom-up approach, describing the coexistence of regulatory instruments of different nature and purpose. They may constitute the building blocks of an STM regime emanating from single fields of regulation. The study identified 8 building blocks of an STM regime that are non-exclusive: space situational awareness, human spaceflight, space debris mitigation and remediation, development of standards for safe space safety, single traffic rules, practices for the management of space resources, national space legislation, and organizational level. While the bottom-up approach requires the coordination of existing future regimes relevant to space activities, the top-down approach aims at creating a comprehensive STM regime in the wider sense. A comprehensive STM regime developed in this study builds on 2 pillars. The first one relates to a body of law that would be integrated and harmonized from various existing sources. And the second pillar to the institutional side for developing and establishing and implementing such a regime. And we are proposing a system modeled from the ITU system that would be a 3-layered system serviced by a secretariat with an outer space convention that would constitute the highest level of regulation. That would be the first level. The second level would be the outer space traffic rules that would be comparable to the ITU administrative regulations. And the third level that is proposed is an outer space traffic technical standards, and this part of the comprehensive STM regime would be dedicated to the development and continuous reviews of standard technical standards and all elements that would be in the outer space traffic rules. So this is kind of a summary of what the study the study is available on the IAA website. In addition, the Academy does conferences on the topic of space situational awareness. The upcoming one is going to be in January in Washington, D.C., and another one on space traffic management that's going to take place in Austin, Texas in February So the Academy is still continuing the ongoing work related to STM. So this concludes my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corinne. And I turn to Christophe Bonal, representing the status of work in IAF.
Thank you very much, Corinne and Kayuva. So I'll present basically the technical issues. I'd like just to recall very quickly why we are dealing with these problems. Sorry for my voice. Okay, 1 week in Washington, air conditioning is awful. So, today's situation is already quite significant, with more than 20,000 catalogued objects and with less than 10% active spacecraft, out of which not all of them are capable of avoiding collisions. Okay. And then the concerns over near future are, first of all, we have large number of small spacecraft with no collision avoidance capacity. Second, very large number of medium-sized spacecraft constellations with specificities. They are moving continuously in a kind of noria. And third, new radar capacities leading to the increased size of catalog. So this was the reason why Kayuva and the other presidents decided to generate this working group. So on our side, IAF, we have a dedicated sub-working group. It's important because it means that we did not yet coordinate with the other ones. Mainly, for instance, all the regulatory aspects have not yet been discussed. And so what was presented there previously by Corinne does not necessarily represent what we'll end up with. We have not yet discussed these points. Technically, the first priority may be the knowledge of what we have above our heads. So we need first to improve our existing means, so need for new sensors, radars, telescopes, including, of course, private. We need to study and promote new systems, orbited sensors, laser wave systems, dedicated onboard markers for very small size objects. There are studies showing that you can have some LED arrays, for instance, on very small spacecraft, helping to track them and identify them. And then the question of data fusion. We have plenty of new information coming from here and there. We, of course, need to share the same time base and formats and so on. Then we need, and this is maybe the most important point, we need to improve the orbital data precision. Today you have a typically, you know where an object is with plus or minus 1 kilometer at 1 sigma, correct me if I'm wrong, but so definitely when you try to avoid collision between two 1 meter objects where you know where they are plus or minus 1 or 2 or 10 kilometers, it's a hard time. So we need to improve the computation means for all the prevision. We can have some options such as using star background and optical observation. Laser ranging from ground or orbit are currently under study. One important point is we need also to improve the UN registration following the Convention of 1974. You know that any object, any operation shall be systematically registered. So what we propose is to consider a systematic pre-registration before mission. So we would ask before, as a prerequisite to an operation, to fill in correctly the pre-registration to UN. And then we need to see how we can share regional SA databases, the catalogs, and of course there are plenty of hurdles that we need to pass, legal, politically, military, and so on. Then in terms of operations, sorry, we need absolutely to improve our in-orbit collision avoidance process. And so for this, we need to have new methodologies to face the increase in size of catalog and to share them. Okay, it's a win-win situation. We need to discuss together and to share these methodologies. So potentially through evolved standards, is it ISO, for instance. We need to improve also the collision avoidance at launch. So this is in the same domain, and so there is an ongoing task at ISO level, and so we have quite a lot of discussions on this point. We need to tackle with the specificities of future operations. So future operations, for instance, with mega constellation, with large constellations, there will be very slow thrust increase in altitude, low thrust decrease in altitude. I think that Kevin O'Connell said a couple of days ago that if everything goes as foreseen, at a given time, is it in 15 years' time, at a given time, we'll have 4,000 satellites moving up and down continuously in orbit. So, of course, we need to optimize this and to see which can be the preferable strategies. We can work on dedicated environment index, and there are several initiatives ongoing. You know, it's kind of a refrigerator-like scoring, A, B, C, D, E, F. And so saying that on a given orbit, well, this one may be overcrowded, and criteria following mass, probability of collision, and so on. So, of course, it would be purely indicative, no enforcement at all. Then we need to work with the corresponding operations coming from space tugs, in-orbit servicing, refueling, potentially suborbital activities. We have not yet discussed the point. Then we need, of course, as was underlined previously, we need to improve the end-of-life disposal, the passivation, transfer to graveyard orbit for GEO or to natural decay, control atmospheric re-entry modeling and prediction with respect to the risk to population. You know that today, when we have a re-entry, we know the date and precision of re-entry at plus or minus 10% of the remaining time. I have an object that will re-enter tomorrow. I know when, plus or minus 2 hours. 2 hours, it's 50,000 kilometers. That may not be enough. So we need absolutely to find ways to improve this. And then last, preparation of future activities. So I'm not really sure that it's space traffic management, since we are dealing with non-active objects. But active debris removal, which has been on study now for 15 years or more, which is a retrieval of very large debris in order to statistically avoid collisions. So you remove the ones which were not the ones that would generate collision, but just statistically, if you remove 10 or 40 dead large objects, you decrease the probability of collision. A new thing which is under study quite heavily between mainly in the US and in Europe is what we call JCA, just-in-time collision avoidance. So the idea is when you detect a potential risk, let's say a high probability of collision between two large non-maneuverable space debris. Okay, normally they are non-maneuverable, so you cannot do a collision avoidance, but nevertheless you can nudge slightly the trajectory of one of the two of them. The nudging is very, very small. We're talking about 4 millimeters per second compared to 8 kilometers per second. And so this can be done following various systems that have been studied. And an extension of this is even called the large debris traffic management, but I will not come into any detail here. And I think, just last point about mitigation guidelines is important. We have a very good set of mitigation guidelines text, so there are standards, guideline recommendation, best practices, charters. We even have a law in France. Globally, they are very coherent. That's the good news. They've been developed since 1995, and we discussed together, and we have a very good set of coherence. But then we have very low compliance to the current rules and guidelines. We have seen that at IDC we have shown that, for instance, if you take Sears, under bracket satellites, more than 100 kilogram at 600 kilometer altitude or more, the compliance level today is less than 20%, 20 years after the first guidelines. So we need to understand why, what is happening, how comes that it's not better, and we could even envisage a further step with some kind of naming and shaming. Okay, please note the question mark. It's not decided, of course. And so these guidelines are not yet adapted to the new practices. There are ongoing actions, so agencies, IDC, ISO, and we welcome the dedicated charter among the operators, such as the Space Safety Coalition. That will end my technical part. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We now turn for the last status report to IISL, represented by Diane Howard.
Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to see us on a Thursday morning, day 4. So I am going to tell you a little bit about how the IISL is employing the two approaches that the IAA study discussed, the bottom-up and the top-down. And I am also going to address something that both of my colleagues who've just spoken before me have mentioned, and that is that the regulatory framework is really not in place. So what we are doing with the IISL and what we bring to this tripartite is a forum where we can gather and synthesize information about all of the issues that were revealed both in the study and also that were just discussed by my colleague Christophe. Because this truly is a transdisciplinary initiative, not just ours, but coordinating space traffic writ large. In order for us to really approach the regulatory structure in an effective and constructive and fruitful way, we really need to draw from the practices and the operations so that whatever we come up with is actually grounded. So, we've been doing an awful lot of outreach. And I will say that we have members that are involved in the top level. So at COPUS, we have many of our IISL members that have been that have participated in the long-term sustainability guidelines work. But also, we at the IISL do a symposium on the first day of legal subcommittee every year. And several years ago, we devoted our symposium topic to space traffic management. And the outcome was really marvelous because we ended up with an agenda item as a result of this really fantastic colloquia that we put on. So that's part of the top-down approach. But in addition to that, some of our outreach has taken the form of making sure that the space law community understands some of the physics involved and some of the technical issues that are involved, so that as they start to put their legal intellects to work to figure out how we can come up with something that's actually constructive and doesn't hinder our activities, remains compliant to our international obligations. So we have a Galloway symposium every year, and last year we did a beautiful panel that included technical people as well as policy people, and it helped level set for the DC legal community, although we did have some people coming to us from other countries. Our President Cayuve Schroegel was with us. But that's not all. We also have done space traffic management workshops 2 times in the last several years in Colorado Springs at Space Symposium, again, with the idea that not so much from a scholarship perspective, but more of a knowledge transfer to share some of the technical information and issues and concerns with the legal community. But we didn't stop there either. This year, yesterday as a matter of fact, we devoted one of our sessions here at the colloquia to space traffic management, and here we really started to compile a body of scholarship. We had some really marvelous papers that started doing exactly what we had hoped. We planted enough seeds and we started getting ideas going along with the things that were revealed in the IAA study, looking to other domains. How are things handled? How are things managed? How are things coordinated? We saw papers that actually really sat at that intersection between the technical and the policy and the law. So we had a paper that discussed Lagrange points, and that's not something I think I've ever heard in an IISL legal colloquia here at IAC. So all of these different efforts, which are taking place internationally and also taking place domestically, are helping us raise awareness of the issues in both sides of this equation, because we really need all of us pulling together to come up with the best ways to tackle these issues. And I think that this is probably key to getting it right. So I like to say that these things are occurring, that there are different phases, but because we're approaching things from both the bottom up as well as the top down. And we're sort of doing this concurrently. I mean, you see, I know I've lost my voice this week as well, and that's because pretty much every day I've been speaking in fora like this about space traffic management. I'm involved in a whole lot of different working groups and technical committees. There are many that I'm not involved in because there's traction, there's like a grassroots effort that's going on. So this outreach and this bringing in of stakeholders is occurring at the same time that some of these initiatives are doing some of these other things. So they're not happening in a linear fashion. So I don't want this to misinform you. This is kind of all coming together at the same time. So there's an initiative that is starting to really look at, has begun to map all the different standards and guidelines and practices and hard law like treaties and conventions, and see which ones are have embedded within in them incorporations by reference other ones. And this is going to help us tackle the issue that Christophe identified, which is a compliance issue. Compliance and enforcement are very, very difficult. So all of this is going on at the same time. It's helping us in the IISL as we lend our fora to these efforts and start to compile scholarship and help raise the awareness of both the legal and the scientific community, and get everybody talking to each other. This is what we bring to the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane, and thanks to all the presenters. They gave you their briefing on the status of the work undertaken in the Academy, in the Federation, as well as in the Institute. And this is where we stand now. Considerable work has been done in the three organizations, and what has been said, our work emanating from the congresses has kicked off a debate which is now, well, really, really broad, where we have a lot of fora, a lot of groups, and also the governments, which are already dealing with the issue. Now, we hope that our work can be useful for that purpose, for providing ideas, providing also guidance, and to educate. The next steps we would like to undertake are to have a white paper for the next IAC in Dubai, and then a position paper very clearly showing the way and providing options to the decision makers at IAC in Paris 21. And you see in bold, we ask for participation, because participation is valuable not only for us, but also for the work undertaken in the group. And we could already start with that today. We have 10 more minutes to go, and I would like to invite you to either ask questions to the three coordinators and provide us with immediate and spontaneous input, what you would like to see shall be undertaken, shall be considered, and shall be reviewed also in that group. So I think we have a microphone. Indicate yes. We already have the first person to ask. Please indicate whom you would like to ask, and then it makes it easier to distribute the responses. Please.
Hi, Scott Millwood, IISL member. My question, well, first of all, thank you very much for highlighting the extent to which you're engaging across organisations and working in parallel. My question to all of you is, to what extent are you also engaging with industry? And I'm thinking of telecommunications companies and aviation sector in order to seek their perspective as well.
Thank you very much. Since addressing all of us, I think we can start with Christophe, then Corinne can also say a few words, and with Diane.
Yeah, okay. I'd like just to answer on a very short part of your question, which is relation with aviation. There are plenty of ideas of trying to have a parallel between the ICAO, International Civilian Aviation Organization, and a so-called ICSO, which would be similar. And to our opinion, it's very, very different. It has no no meaning, sorry, no meaning to try to do a parallel between the two of them. The constraints are completely different. The current framework is completely different. So definitely this is something that we would not push through.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
So I will say that, first of all, our events are open to anybody, and we've had, yesterday when I looked out at the people that were in the session that I mentioned that I chaired, there were a number of people that were from all different communities, industry, people that were regulators, people that were technical people, as well as the legal community. I will say that in the number of years that I've been involved in this work, and I'm taking off my IISL hat, and I'm going to put on Diane Howard, STM person hat, the aviation community has been engaged in an awful lot of the efforts and has been invited, I mean, any of our things are open to them, but mostly in the context of getting through the airspace to orbit and coming back, not as much as looking at them for guidance with regard to what we should do. And I think that kind of follows along with what Christophe is saying. That said, yesterday when we had our session, there were a number of papers that did touch upon these multiple domain ideas. And I think the idea is that we need to look to see how things have been done, what's worked and what hasn't, and perform a comparative analysis. So everything's open to anybody who will come.
Thank you. Corinne?
Yeah, I would say at the Academy, the industry is also represented and when represented in our study, but in the follow-on activities, this is one aspect that we want to continue to do and reinforce in the follow-on activities on STM and to involve the industry at the broader level.
Thank you. Next question. Yep.
Hi, my name is Eng Tek. I'm from Singapore. So first, I would like to appreciate the good work that you've done. It's a very important work. But I noted that the low compliance rate that was quoted, I'm actually very concerned. And how confident are you for the new initiatives, right? How do you actually encourage people to actually adopt it? As in, what's the strategy moving forward to get more countries to adopt and finally to create a very sustainable use of space?
Diane?
I think you can see the glass half full or half empty. One of the reasons for our low compliance today is that it takes quite a lot of time to apply for some rules. If, for instance, if I take a rule which was elaborated, the ISO was elaborated in 2010, well, 2019, it's too early to have already taken these things into account. So this is the first thing. Second thing, still half full glass. I must say that so far, every large constellations operators with whom we've discussed always showed that they were very concerned about the question, very aware, very knowing the situation, and they've asked us to present the results about simulation, future simulations in order to really understand the system. Okay, now they have empty glass is that they are not flying yet. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they are effectively compliant. And for instance, the studies that we've done at IDC level show that if they are compliant, then life is fine, perfect, no problem. If they are just slightly non-compliant, then it can be hectic and exponentially. So it's still open. We don't yet know what will be the level of compliance. Considering that, so this is why, for instance, an initiative such as naming and shaming, which we already have at IDC level, but this is confidential, okay, is something which could help in emulating people and inciting them to comply correctly with the rules.
Well, related to compliance is, of course, enforceability, and there I would like to ask Diane, what perspective would you see in view of enforceability of space traffic management rules?
I don't think we're there yet. I think right now we're trying to make a better mousetrap with regard to providing better SSA data, fusing different data sets, finding ways to engage internationally with regard to this SSA data sets. ways to leverage the commercial capabilities. We don't know what we don't know. I mean, we have 30,000 filings with the FCC, yes, we do understand and appreciate, but what Christophe said is very, very accurate. We don't know what's going to be, and there are different perspectives with it. So right now, I think we need to do what we can, and I think we shouldn't overreach, and we shouldn't blow this opportunity, if you will, worrying about enforcing something that we don't even know what we need to enforce. So I do believe that there are ways to incentivize responsible behavior in space. I think that you can also name and shame. That's always an available mechanism internationally, and international law always goes through this kind of challenge, trying to find a way to enforce. However, at the domestic level, you definitely can do things you can enforce. That does require, I mean, here in the US, we have this marvelous Space Policy Directive 3, which came out in June of 2018, which is an extremely well-articulated, I think it's 14 pages, and it's a well-articulated tasking and roadmap that starts with principles and goals and objectives and then tasks. Roles and responsibilities for different branches of the different parts of the executive branch here in the U.S. And we're focusing on working on all of those taskings. And I think as the rest of this continues to unfold, how to enforce is going to emerge. We're gonna see better what kind of enforcement mechanisms are most appropriate. And because the idea isn't to punish after it's done, the idea is to try to find ways to prevent the bad behavior from occurring. So we have to take a step back and not look at this in more traditional ways of, you penalize or you lose a license. Once it's in space, it's real hard to unring that bell. So that creates different kinds of regulatory challenges, and enforcement is definitely a part of that.
Thank you. Next question. See you over there.
Hello, Jacob Gear from the UK. I work on policy, and thank you again for these organisations coming together to deliver this programme. My question is around the timeline. This panel is about space traffic management needed now, and your next steps, present papers next year and then in 2 years' time. Do you think this is quick enough to address the risk that we face in the space environment now? And do you think we need to accelerate it? If so, how, obviously, is the next question.
Right, thank you. Certainly, we would have loved to present already the position paper this year. Nevertheless, we go fairly slowly and carefully. You will, in any case, see intermediary steps. And these intermediary steps and results might already serve as guidance for anybody who would like to listen to them. Next year already we will present something which will look fairly like a kind of set of options and a guidance for action, while then in 21 we will have a full-fledged position paper. Of course, we understand also, and Diane mentioned the Space Policy Directive. We will see also under the EU Council presidency of Germany next year an initiative on building an equivalent position on the European side. That it is an enormously dynamic environment. But nevertheless, we don't want to push too quickly and take up all these developments. And even in 21, it will be an excellent time for a consolidated position, which will be very helpful, I guess, for the diplomatic as well as governmental debate and domestic debate, which will by then have developed in a way that, in our understanding, it will be a useful point to have something consolidated for the discussion.
If I could just make one comment. My experience is if it goes up quick, it comes down quick. So sometimes a slower, more programmatic approach, you end up with something that's much more useful. We really want whatever goes into the white paper and the position paper to have traction and use. And in order for it to have traction and use, it really needs to be coming out of the practices which we're only now really beginning to share.
Okay, I'm sorry, my position is a little bit different. I think the question is very good, and you should not mix up between practical daily job actions, improvements, and things like this, and a high-level synthesis document grouping all three, I would say, the complete world. The actions that we are dealing with today, I tend to say we need them before Christmas, okay, because so we need really to have a very fast reaction. And of course, there will be failures, there will be discussions, there will be no, we should not do this, but rather this, but we need absolutely to be moving. And I'd like to give an example, once again, the IADC example, where we identified the problem, the emergence of large constellations, and immediately it took us, I think, 3, 4, 5 months to produce a position, not a position paper, I don't remember its title exact, but a recommendation paper on this. And this document was taken as a basis for the space security coalition, which is a very good text. So we move, it's fast, these documents are still draft, not approved, and so on and so on. So there are the two tempo. We need to move fast now, because the problem is now, and in parallel we need to take a little bit of back step, think of what we write, and have a major signature. So I fully agree with what Kai-Uwe says. It's if we have a good white paper already in Dubai, that would be wonderful.
I just want to clarify one thing. I wasn't suggesting that we shouldn't be moving quickly with regard to addressing these issues. I meant I think this is a good timeline to put together a really good white paper, because I think we're gathering the information to put into it. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Yeah, no, that's what I agreed. I was going to mention that.
Okay, thank you. This is where we stand. This is where we will go. Your participation is valuable. You now see and you now know the leading people in the three organizations. They will be more than happy to get your responses and your input. And with that, I hope to see you at our GNF in Dubai, where we will present the white paper. Thank you very much.